I shouldn't have stayed as long as I did that night. But I did. It started, like most things do, without meaning to. Just a Tuesday evening, the kind where the streets felt too quiet, and the hum of the laundromat machines was the only proof that the world was still moving. I'd been there an hour already, sitting in the corner chair with my phone face down, watching the dryer door spin my life in slow circles. She walked in like she always did, quiet, without looking around, carrying that canvas tote bag with the ink stain on the strap. 40-something, maybe mid-40s, though she carried herself like she'd stopped counting years a long time ago. Her hair was tied up, loose in a way that looked unintentional, but probably wasn't. I don't know when I started noticing her hands. Maybe that first week, when she fumbled with the change machine and muttered something soft under her breath. Or maybe it was the way she folded each shirt with a kind of care that didn't match this place, this hour. She caught my eye, just for a second. Not the kind of look that means anything, not really. But it stayed with me anyway. Back again, she said, passing my chair on her way to the washers. I almost didn't answer. Guess I like the noise, I muttered, fiddling with the corner of my folded napkin, the one I'd brought with my takeout. She smiled, just enough to tilt her cheekbones. The noise, huh? That's a new one. I wanted to say something better, something clever. Instead, I just looked down at my phone again, pretending to check the time. That became the routine. Tuesdays, sometimes Thursdays. Not planned, but we always ended up there, like some quiet agreement neither of us had signed. She'd sit a few machines down, sometimes reading, sometimes just staring at her spinning clothes like I did. Every so often, a small conversation, weather, broken machines, the bad fluorescent lighting. It was nothing. It was everything. I don't think she knew how much I noticed. The way she always carried an extra thermos of coffee, setting it beside her tote, like a small ritual. Or the way her lips parted, just slightly, when she was thinking. Some nights, when the loneliness felt heavier than usual, I'd almost text someone, an ex, an old friend, anyone, but the words never seemed right. So I'd just sit there, listening to the washers thrum, waiting for her to arrive. That night, she didn't just pass by. She stopped, stood there in front of my chair, her tote hanging off her shoulder, eyes tracing the book I'd been pretending to read. "Is it good?" she asked, tilting her chin toward the cover. I swallowed. "I don't know yet." She laughed quietly. "Fair answer." Then, after a pause, softer, "You don't talk much, do you?" I met her eyes then. "I talk," I said. "Just not well." Something flickered there. Maybe recognition. Maybe curiosity. "Well," she said, shifting her weight. "Good thing I don't mind filling the silence." And just like that, she sat down in the chair across from me, as if it had always been hers. The hum of the machines felt louder, like they were trying to make up for the words I couldn't find. We talked. About nothing. Her broken porch light, my job that wasn't really a job, the neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking. And when my dryer finally buzzed, she didn't get up right away. Neither did I. As I packed my clothes into the basket, she stood, adjusting the strap of her tote, and said, almost casually, "You should come by sometime. Coffee's better at my place." I froze. She smiled then. "Slow. Certain. If you want," she added, almost as an afterthought, though we both knew it wasn't. By the time I got home, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. One line, no punctuation, Friday. 8. Don't be late. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, heart louder than it should have been. And all I could think was, this feels dangerous. And somehow, that felt good. Friday night felt unreal, even before I knocked on her door. The house was smaller than I expected, single story, brick, with a porch light that flickered when I pressed the bell. She opened the door before I could knock again, barefoot, hair loose around her shoulders. "Right on time," she said, stepping back to let me in. I mumbled something, "Yeah, maybe," and wiped my palms on my jeans. The house smelled like coffee and something faintly floral, not perfume exactly, but lived in. "You can sit," she said, motioning to the couch. "Tea or coffee?" "Coffee," I said. She disappeared into the kitchen. I sat, hands clasped, trying not to stare at the books stacked under the window, the half-finished puzzle on the dining table, the small signs of a life lived quietly but fully. When she came back, she handed me a mug. No sugar, no cream, like she somehow knew. You live alone? I asked before I could stop myself. Yeah, she said, easing into the armchair across from me. Divorced. 7 years now. My son's at college. Calls once a week when he remembers. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Sometimes I think the house got bigger when he left. Or maybe I just got smaller. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, tracing the rim of my mug with my thumb. And you? She asked, leaning back. What's your story? Not much to tell, I said. Work, home, repeat. Mostly quiet. I guess. I got used to being by myself. She tilted her head. That doesn't bother you? I hesitated. Sometimes. But it's easier than trying, you know? People always want something. Or they leave. Her gaze softened, like she recognized something in that. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It felt mutual, like neither of us had to fill it. After a while, she stood. Come on, help me with something. In the kitchen, she handed me a screwdriver and pointed to a loose cabinet handle. Been meaning to fix that for weeks, she said. I crouched down, tightening the screws while she leaned against the counter, sipping her tea. The quiet stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. You're good with your hands, she said casually. I felt my face heat. Not really. Just basic stuff. When I finished, I turned to find her closer than I expected, the edge of her sweater brushing my arm. She didn't step back right away. Neither did I. Thanks, she said softly, almost like it was about more than the handle. Later, we sat on the couch, coffee long gone, a movie playing low in the background that neither of us was watching. She asked about my family, my childhood. I told her about summers spent fishing with my grandfather, about how quiet the nights felt back then. She told me about leaving home at 18, marrying too young, thinking she knew what love was. Turns out, she said, swirling her tea, knowing someone isn't the same as being known by them. I didn't have an answer for that, but she didn't seem to need one. It was late when I finally stood to leave. She walked me to the door, arms folded loosely over her chest. Thanks for tonight, I said, and it came out quieter than I meant. She smiled, small and tired in something else. You make the house feel less empty, she said. I turned to go, but her hand brushed my sleeve. Barely a touch, almost accidental. Except it wasn't. See you Tuesday, she murmured. And just like that, I knew I'd spend every moment until then thinking about the way her fingers had lingered, just long enough to make it impossible to forget. Tuesday didn't feel like Tuesday. Not after Friday. I walked into the laundromat later than usual, hoping maybe she wouldn't be there yet. Hoping maybe she would. She was, leaning against the counter, tote bag at her feet, hair pulled back like the first time I saw her. She looked up when the door chimed, and something in her face shifted, barely, but I caught it. You're late, she said. Not a question. Yeah, work. It wasn't true. She nodded, like she didn't believe me but wasn't going to call me on it. For a while, it felt normal. The hum of machines, the faint smell of detergent, her voice low when she asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. She handed me a granola bar from her bag without looking at me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But there was something in the air. Oh wait. She kept glancing toward the window. Not at the street, at her reflection, maybe. And I couldn't stop looking at her hands, at the way they tightened around the strap of her tote. You're quiet tonight, I said finally. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. Am I? Yeah. She shrugged. Maybe I'm just thinking. I wanted to ask what about. I didn't. Half an hour later, the door opened again. Some guy, early 30s, loud, familiar with the clerk. He nodded to her. Too casual, too comfortable, and something in my chest tightened. Hey, he said. Didn't expect to see you here. She smiled, polite, distant, but her shoulders stiffened. Yeah, just laundry. They talked for a minute. Nothing important. Nothing that should have mattered. But it did. When he finally left, I pretended to check my phone, tried to look like I hadn't noticed the way her voice changed, softer but sharper. You know him? I asked, too quickly. Used to, she said. And that was it. We didn't talk much after that. Not until she was folding her clothes, slipping each piece into her tote with deliberate care. Listen, she said finally, not looking at me. Friday, that was nice. But maybe we should, she trailed off, shook her head. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking. I felt something drop in my stomach. If you don't want me to, no. She cut in, sharper than she meant. Then softer, no. It's not that. She turned then, met my eyes for the first time all night. It's just, this is dangerous. You know that, right? I wanted to tell her I didn't care. That none of it mattered. But the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Instead, I said, yeah, I know. And still, I didn't move when she stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her coffee, the clean fabric of her sweater. Close enough that if I tilted my head just slightly, but she stopped. Inches away. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then fell back to her side. You should go, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't argue, just gathered my basket, heart hammering loud enough I was sure she could hear it. At the door, I looked back. She was standing where I'd left her, arms crossed, staring at the floor like she was trying to unthink whatever had just almost happened. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I managed was, see you Friday. And the way her shoulders tensed, then didn't, told me she'd be thinking about it too. Friday night was colder than it should have been. The kind of cold that seeps under your sleeves, even when you swear you don't care. She'd texted that morning. Coffee. After 9. Bring nothing but yourself. I almost didn't go. Spent an hour pacing my room, telling myself it was better to let this fade quietly. But at 8:55, I was already standing outside her house, hands jammed in my jacket pockets, breath fogging in the porch light. She opened the door slower this time. Not smiling. Not exactly. Come in, she said, soft, almost careful. Inside, the living room was dim, only the corner lamp on. No music, no movie, just the quiet hum of the heater and the faint smell of rain on the wood deck. She handed me a mug, sat on the opposite end of the couch. We didn't talk at first, just sat there, sipping coffee, pretending not to notice the silence pressing in. Finally, she said, you're different lately. I blinked. Different how? She stared into her cup, swirling the coffee. Quieter. Like you're somewhere else when you're here. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I said, maybe I'm just trying not to mess this up. That made her look up. Really look. Mess what up? You. I said, before I could think better of it. Us. Whatever this is. The air shifted. Heavy. Sharp. She set her mug down, leaned back into the couch like she needed the space. You think there's an US, she said, not cruel, not mocking, just tired. I swallowed hard. Isn't there? Her laugh was soft, humorless. You're 23. I'm 46. You think you know what you want, but, she trailed off, rubbing her temple with her thumb. But I do, I said. Too fast. Too raw. Her hand stilled. She didn't look at me. You don't understand the weight of this. The risk. I've done this before. With someone younger. It doesn't end well. I wanted to ask what happened. Why her voice went quiet, almost breaking, when she said before. But I didn't. Instead, I said, maybe I don't care how it ends. That made her look at me again, eyes sharp, searching. You should, she whispered. The silence after that was brutal. Not empty. Full of things neither of us could say. She stood first, walked toward the kitchen like she needed distance, but stopped halfway, hands braced on the back of the chair. You think this is just about you, she said, voice shaking now, but quiet. But it's me too. I wake up thinking about you. I wait for Tuesdays like they mean something. And I hate myself for it. Because I should know better. My chest ached, but I stayed where I was, fingers curling tight around my coffee mug. Then don't hate yourself, I said, softer than I meant. She turned her head slightly, like she'd heard me but didn't trust herself to answer. I stood then, crossed the room slowly, every step louder than it should have been. When I stopped, we were close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off her, smell the faint trace of soap and coffee clinging to her sweater. Her hands dropped to her sides. Mine twitched, useless, wanting to reach, but not daring. You don't know what you're doing, she murmured. Maybe not, I said, my voice shaking. But I know what I want. She closed her eyes, exhaled, shaky, and then, Just before something could happen, before I could close that last inch, her eyes opened, meeting mine. And all she said was, "What are we doing?" She didn't text that week. Not Tuesday. Not Friday. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She was busy, distracted, tired. People had lives. People got caught up in them. But by Saturday, the silence had grown teeth. I went to the laundromat anyway, sat in the same chair, pretended to scroll through my phone while the dryers hummed and the minutes dragged. She didn't come. By the second week, I stopped pretending it was about laundry. I stopped going altogether. But my nights were restless, filled with half-dreams of her voice, her hands. The quiet of my apartment felt louder, somehow. On Thursday, I saw her. Not where I expected. Not how I wanted. I was leaving the coffee shop near the corner when she walked in, laughing at something the man beside her said. He looked about her age, broad shoulders, easy smile, the kind of confidence that filled the space around him. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. I stood there, holding the door like an idiot, my stomach twisting in a way that felt almost childish. That night, I typed out a message. Did I do something? Stared at it until the letters blurred, then deleted it. Typed another. Missed you Tuesday. Deleted that, too. By the time I finally set my phone down, the only thing left on the screen was her name. Nothing else. The days stretched. I buried myself in work, in anything that didn't leave space for her. But every quiet moment betrayed me. The empty chair in the laundromat I passed on the way home. The thermos I'd started to bring to the shop because I couldn't not think of hers. The third week, there was a knock at my door. Just once. Light. By the time I opened it, the hallway was empty. On the floor was a paper bag. Inside, a pack of my favorite coffee beans and a single sticky note. Sorry. Needed time. No explanation. No invitation. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I thought about texting. About asking her why. About saying I didn't need space. That I'd take whatever she was willing to give. But what if she didn't want to give anything? So I didn't. Instead, I went back to the laundromat the following Tuesday. Sat in the same chair. Watched the same hum of machines, the same endless spin. And when the bell over the door chimed, my heart jumped. Too fast, too hopeful. But it wasn't her. It never was. That night, I poured myself coffee from the beans she'd left. It tasted bitter, sharper than I remembered. I sat there with the mug cooling in my hands, phone glowing on the table beside me. One unsent message stared back. Are you okay? I typed her name again. Paused. Backspaced it. In the end, I turned the phone face down and sat there in the quiet, the unanswered question thick in the room. Wondering if she was drinking coffee too. Wondering if she thought of me. Wondering if I'd ever stopped. It was raining the night I finally saw her again. Not a storm, just that steady, quiet kind of rain that makes the streets shine like wet glass. I hadn't planned on it. I just walked, no direction, hands deep in my pockets, trying to make the noise in my head quieter. Her porch light was on. Same flicker, same dim glow against the ring. I stopped at the bottom step, breath caught somewhere in my chest. I almost turned back. But then the door opened. She stood there, sweater sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair pulled into a loose knot, the same tired look in her eyes that I'd been carrying in mine. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just the sound of rain and the faint hum of the lamp behind her. I didn't think you'd, she started, then stopped. I wasn't going to, I said. But my throat tightened. I couldn't keep not seeing you. Her hand gripped the doorframe. White knuckles. You shouldn't be here. I know, I said. But I am. She exhaled, slow, and stepped aside. Come in before you get sick. Inside, everything felt the same. The faint coffee smell, the quiet hum of the heater, the puzzle still unfinished on the dining table. Like nothing had changed. Like everything had. I stood there, dripping rain onto her rug, unsure what to do with my hands, my words. She handed me a towel, not looking at me. You shouldn't have come, she said again, softer this time. Why? I asked. Finally, she looked up. And it wasn't anger in her face. It was fear. Because I don't know how to not want this, she said, voice breaking in the middle. And I don't know if I can survive it if it ends. I swallowed hard. the lump in my throat almost painful. It already feels like it ended, I said quietly. These last weeks. Like you weren't there, but you were everywhere. I couldn't. My voice trailed off, useless. Her hands trembled slightly as she crossed her arms, like holding herself together. This isn't simple, she whispered. You're so young. You still have time to figure out who you are, what you want. And she stopped, shaking her head. I'm too old to be someone's lesson. I'm not here to learn anything, I said. I just want to be where you are. Even if it's just for now. Even if it's not forever. The room went still after that. Even the rain outside felt quieter, like it was waiting, too. Her eyes searched mine, desperate, uncertain. And then, slowly, she let her arms fall. You make this house feel less empty, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't remember the last time anyone did that. I took a step closer. Not touching her. Not yet. Just close enough that she could feel it. I don't need forever, I said. I just need now. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. And then, carefully, like it cost her something, her hand found mine. Fingers tentative at first, then steadier. Warm. Real. Neither of us said anything. There wasn't anything left to say. She just squeezed my hand once, small but sure, and whispered, Okay. Mornings are quieter now. Not lonely, just quiet. I wake up before the alarm, make coffee the way she likes it. Black, no sugar, the way I learned from watching her thermos all those Tuesdays ago. She still teases me about that, says I probably ruined myself for cream and sugar forever. But she drinks it every morning, and somehow that makes it worth it. We don't talk about beginnings much. Maybe because we don't need to. There's something sacred in how ordinary it all feels now. My jacket hanging next to hers by the door, the quiet hum of the kettle in the kitchen, her glasses forgotten on the couch cushion where she fell asleep reading. Time didn't make things perfect. Nothing ever is. There are still days when she disappears into herself, when she thinks too much about what people would say, about what it means to build something with someone half her age. And there are days when I catch myself worrying about the future, about whether this will burn out like she once feared it would. But then there are the other days. Most of them, really. Days when the world feels soft, manageable. When I find her sitting on the porch in the early evening, legs curled under her, tea steaming in her mug, and she looks up with that small, knowing smile that still knocks the air out of me. It took time to get here. Time and patience neither of us thought we had. Weeks of cautious steps, of testing the edges of what we were building. But the distance we once kept, those inches, that hesitation, is gone now. We still go to the laundromat sometimes. Not because we need to, but because it feels like ours. Same hum of the machines, same bad fluorescent lights, same quiet corner. She'll fold the clothes while I sit and watch, and sometimes, when no one's around, she'll glance at me with that same look she had the first night she said, Friday. 8. Don't be late. And every time, I feel it. How far we've come. I think what surprised me most was how normal it became. How something that once felt dangerous, impossible, has turned into this quiet certainty. I don't question it anymore. Neither does she. The first time her son visited, I braced for distance, for the walls to go back up. But she just smiled, squeezed my hand under the table, and introduced me like I'd been here all along. Later, after he'd gone, I caught her staring at me with that look, the one that says you stayed. And maybe that's all this ever was about. Staying. Showing up. Even when it was hard. Tonight, it's raining again. That same steady kind of rain from the night I knocked on her door. She's in the kitchen now, humming quietly while she makes tea, and I'm sitting on the couch, the mug of coffee cooling in my hands, listening to the sound of her moving around in the next room. It's not grand. It's not cinematic. But it's ours. When she comes in, she sets her mug on the table and curls up beside me, her head resting against my shoulder. We don't talk. We don't need to. Outside, the rain taps against the windows, steady and sure. After a while, she tilts her head, looks up at me with that quiet half-smile. 8:47, she says, soft enough that only I can hear. And I smile, because we both know what it means. The first time I walked into that laundromat, the time glowing on the clock above the dryers. 8:47 p.m. The minute everything started. I don't tell her I love her. Not because I don't, but because we don't need the words. Instead, I squeeze her hand once, the same way she did that night in her kitchen, when all we had was okay. And she smiles, small and sure, like she always does, and leans her head back against my shoulder. For the first time in a long time, life feels finished. Not perfect, not easy, but finished in the way that matters. If this story found you, if it made you pause, even for a moment, share it. Someone out there is waiting for their own quiet, okay.